Welcome to Slacking Business Technology. No, I'm just kidding. I thought maybe I'd come up with a new name every week or something. I don't know. Welcome to Hacking Business Technology, the podcast that matters in IT. I've got Mr. Kawasaki and Mr. Hooper with me. Welcome, gentlemen.
What's up?
Hello.
We also have the well-esteemed and what I call the best read in the ITSM industry, Mr. Roger Williams. Welcome, Roger.
Welcome. It's great to be here, guys.
Hey,
More
Roger.
important, Roger actually listens to the podcast.
Absolutely.
One of the best zoos in Rhode Island as well, too.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, were you a guest on our other podcast? I don't actually remember.
No, I never made it on there. We talked about it. Never did
Oh,
happen.
amazed.
So it's great to finally make it.
Yeah, you're in now.
Yep.
All right. So before we get started, Mr. Williams, why don't you go over kind of how you got here? You talked a little bit about how you went to school for computer engineering, and then what did you not like about it?
Yeah, I didn't like the fact that I liked programming, but I didn't like having to write programs that other people were telling me to write. Fortunately, at that point, the internet and the web had just started getting big. This was back in '93, '94. And it was much easier to get the programs that I wanted written by programmers much more talented than myself. So I kind of floated around for a little bit. I finished up my degree eventually, but moved into tech support, started working for a retailer then while I was still in school, went to work for another retailer after that, did tech support for a long time, started moving into the service management space, working on problem management, back to the service desk, started managing there. Then started moving into CSI, and nowadays I fix problems. That's what I do for a living. All kinds of problems.
I like that. I think everyone does. They just don't admit it, or they don't know. They don't ever get to the point of simplifying it to that point. So,
Yep.
Roger, I know you're speaking at ITSM soon, and you've got this book out.
Yep.
Managing in a service-focused world. It's really hard to read backwards because the Google
Yep.
Hangout does it backwards. But,
Roger, you speaking at Fusion?
Yes, we'll be speaking at Fusion next month on our CSI experiences there, and should be a lot of fun.
What day's your session?
It's on Wednesday, so hopefully there will be some people still in at the session to be able to attend. But for whoever shows up, we'll try to give them a good time.
Good.
Is there a subtitle to the book or a what do you call it, a byline?
yes,
What
it's
is that?
I, Team, Stewards, and Marketplace.
Yes, it's very corny. I love backronyms. What can I say? But the idea of the byline is that these are the four main stakeholders that managers need to be able to take care of. So the perspective of the book is, what do managers need to do in order to serve each of these four stakeholders effectively?
Yeah. What you notice right away when you pick it up is actually even the foreword is organized in that manner.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of deliberation that went into the structure of the book. It was important for me that whoever read this book could get to the information they needed. This stuff can be really complex, and we often talk about it in complex ways, but I really wanted to focus on making it simple, making it accessible, not dumbing it down, but making it to where people can engage with it at their level, get what they need from it, be able to come back from it later and learn new things from it. Those are my kinds of favorite books, so I tried to write that kind of a book as well.
So tell us, Roger, what drove you to write a book? I mean, you're a practitioner. You're responsible for a particular company, and their needs, and I mean, I imagine it's not part of your regular duties to enhance others' knowledge or understanding of how things could go better in the world. So what made you do that, and how long will you be a practitioner?
Fantastic question. I think it's really just an extension of what I do every day. My job every day is helping people, whether I was taking phone calls or trying to fix problems. It comes down to helping people get what they need. That's service management in a nutshell is what that's really about. From that standpoint, I didn't see anything that was out there that really helped people to understand how to manage holistically. I see a lot of bad management every day, and I used to practice a lot of it myself and still do from time to time. It's not something that is easily avoided, but there's not really any. I mean, there's a lot of good management books that are out there. it's difficult to find one that really gives you an approach that you can use for how to think about things instead of just, in this situation, do A or B or C.
Yeah, right at the beginning, he actually introduces, I love this concept, by the way, management as a service.
Yep.
Love it.
Absolutely. Ultimately, the goal of any manager is to deliver the outcomes that are needed by their organization, but you also have to deliver the outcomes your people need, or they won't stay.
Right.
It's so nerdy. I just love it. I can't get it.
Is this book more anecdotal then, Roger? I mean, did you say the war stories are kind of situational?
I really didn't put as much of my personality into it as I thought I would. It was interesting. I started writing it that way, but I just wasn't a talented enough writer to be able to pull that off. So I ended up focusing more on concepts and here's how to do specific things that many people will just tell you, hey, go coach people. Well, that's great, but okay, how do I do that? And the intent is to take a lot of what I've read, what I've listened to, boil that down into concepts that make sense, and then apply that in a framework that people are familiar with. You know, IDLE, ITSM, more or less, you know, it's a holistic framework. So why not use concepts that people understand in order to talk about these things so they can get it and absorb all of it?
Well, for once, I'm going to disagree with you, Roger. I think it's
right.
dripping with you. At the beginning, you've got the acknowledgement specifically. You talk specifically about who influenced your opinion in here, and you talk about your family and your parents and how they raised you. It's got you in it there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I stand corrected, Matt. Good point.
He's testing to see if you actually read it, Baron.
That's like the first thing.
Somebody read it. Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to get past that. Actually, you see it all there. That's fantastic. And then what's really good is, and I kind of had the same question Hooper just did. I was wondering if it was allegorical. Are you actually trying to tell us a lesson in ITSM through our lives, or are you trying to tell that we've got our lives figured out, and now here's how we apply it to ITSM?
I think the two really end up merging to be the same thing. Can we really separate the two of those in the world that we live in now? It's difficult to say that I've got this space where I think about things one way and then I go to another space where it's completely different. The issues we struggle with are the same. We try to do too much. We focus on trying to do the things that we think people need versus asking them what they need. We don't build relationships with people that we need to have good relationships with, and we don't think about how we can influence the way things are going. Those issues are the same whether you're sitting around the dinner table or you're sitting around the boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, same mistakes, different industry, or different people sitting there, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, you tied, I remember it started basically with knowledge management, and that one really rang home with me. It's beautiful to see, like, the categorization. I always love this stuff. Chris is always doing the same thing. He's, of course, mentioned in the acknowledgments, Mr. Dancy, the Godfather himself. But you talk specifically about the functions that you need to perform within knowledge management and then tie it back to your personal behavior. And,
Yep.
you know, I see it time and time again that people still don't. The concept of the knowledge locker, people get it, but they never take the time to, like, set it up. And so Roger goes through, like, you need to think about your data warehousing and where is this stuff going to go, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I found that critical. Even in writing the book itself, the concepts were useful. I ended up writing most of the book in Evernote. And
Awesome.
in order to do that, I would organize by chapters. I would pull articles, things that I found interesting, different concepts, pull it all together. And I found that whenever I was struggling to find how does this apply in this context, quick search, I would find what I needed.
Yeah.
And the value that comes from good organization and being able to pull the information that you need is just valuable in every context.
And acknowledging the fact that we need technology to be the best we can be. I mean, we do need a locker because our brains don't function in the way we need them to function.
Absolutely. Technology allows us to solve a lot of problems. It introduces new problems as it's doing it, but then at least we have a choice on which problems we want to deal with.
So who's the audience for you, Roger? I mean, obviously you're an ITSM practitioner, and you associate with a lot of ITSM folks, so you want them to read it. But was that really your destination, or was there a separate demographic you were thinking of long-term, bigger picture?
The main demographic that this book focuses on are people that are thinking about getting into management, that are kind of on that borderline of that senior contributor, that expert that does everything, that is thinking about, hey, maybe do I want to be a manager? Why would anybody want to be a manager? As well as the folks that are actually in that role that are struggling, that find themselves on phone calls 24/7, checking email all day, pulled in too many directions, not delivering things on time, dealing with drama at work every day, just giving them some things that they can use to help reduce that. That's really the target audience for this book.
Nice.
You know, I applaud you for writing a book. I applaud anybody for writing a book.
No kidding.
In 2002, I started writing a book about policy and procedures, and I wanted to be very pragmatic, very practical. And I stopped because I just felt like I was investing so much of my own emotion and experience into it that if people started to criticize it, I couldn't take it. You know, I think at this point in my life, I'm probably more thick-skinned, and people beat me up all the time, so I don't worry about it. But back then, I was definitely more IT-ish and fragile. You know, so I mean, did you have that same experience? Did you feel that way at all? Or?
I definitely could not have written this book 10 or 15 years ago for the same reasons that you described, as well as just not having the experiences really needed to share something useful with the audience that I wanted to share with. I find as I work with different folks at all levels of organizations, connect with people outside the industry, you find the same problems that come up over and over again, and being able to address those issues is really where the value comes from around this stuff. And from a personal standpoint, it's helped me a lot over the years, even just thinking about service management, to really get into that continual improvement mindset, that every time any feedback that I get around this book that there's this issue or doesn't address this or whatnot, that's just going to help me down the road. So you can hear it's changing the perspective of using that as fuel versus using it as something that's beating you over the head.
It's one big knowledge article, V1.
Well, Roger, what do you think about like self-management or self-managed teams or communities that manage themselves? I mean, since you're writing about management, what do you think about that concept? Is the role of the manager decreasing in importance, do you think?
That's a interesting question, Mark. I think that depending on your context, the need for management is not as great. I think just kind of the long-term trajectory of things is that we're seeing smaller teams, smaller organizations, a lot of that being driven by the ability for us to be able to really specify outcomes in a way that we haven't been able to do it in the past. I don't need a 10,000 person organization to deliver classified ads for the entire United States.
Or anything anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
And there's still context where you still need a lot of boots on the ground in order to get things done. And in those sorts of contexts, you need that sort of coordinating function that management provides. But the same principles apply to the individuals or the teams that are trying to direct their own work as they do to what a good manager ought to be doing. The difference is just in who's picking up the paycheck and who's ultimately signing off on the things that are getting done.
Yeah, there's several aspects of it, right? There's like the HR part of it, which is really it comes down to performance management. Sometimes they fulfill that performance management role, but you know, at some point you can automate that, or you know, can you empower your employees to do it for themselves, or can you do that distributed? And it comes down to what the organization needs, because maybe you are actually in like some specialized manufacturing plant where you've got two sets of employees, some are hourly and some are salaried, and some go through training and some don't, and some have mandatory training. And I think like when it comes down to management, it's sort of the same thing. But the other part of management that people like, it's implied that they will lead, and I think that's sort of where no, it's not. You don't think it's implied that they will lead?
No, definitely not. I agree. I disagree 100%. I believe leaders set direction, managers ensure compliance. I never look to managers to lead.
So let me ask you this: at what point does someone become a leader? At director level, VP level?
No. A leader is a personality type. A leader is someone who can can see the vision, see the dangers on the other side of the hill. They could be your help desk agent, and they're a leader, and it's just nurturing the disciplines and giving that person a time and opportunity to prove that their vision is solid and that their energy is sustainable.
And then the rest of it is really just to make sure that everyone's upholding the same objectives, the objectives of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. What does a manager do? A manager goes back and says, okay, did we checklist this stuff? Did we give them a performance review? I'll give you a perfect example. And I'm going to air a little dirty laundry here, but just recently we went through a hiring process. We brought a bunch of people on here at ISM. And I asked the executive team, I said, don't we have clearly established goals and objectives? And they said, no, we kind of leave it a little bit loosey-goosey. And I was like, okay, really? And people are okay with that? And they said, yeah, for the most part, they've been okay with that. And then no sooner I'm getting a phone call saying, hey, listen, we're ready to hire this person. Now, you're going to manage them. You're going to make sure they're doing the right thing, right? And it clicked in my head right there and then. This is why they have that mentality. They're wanting to manage a person and not manage an outcome because they're not setting the clear objectives and what that person's supposed to do to be successful. Whereas if you do the work up front and you set the vision as a leader and you tell them, hey, if we get to this base, or if we get to that area, or if we take that mountain, then we'll all share success. Now it is, do you have the supplies to need it? Do you have the resources? Do you need support? That's the management of it. But the leadership is the vision on where you want to get to. And letting people run and go there is how you get. That's just my opinion.
I understand that you're saying they're separate things, but I believe that anyone who has a manager that is not a leader is suffering in some kind of way. I mean, it is implied in the sense that you can't just glean leadership from other leaders necessarily unless it's a matrix organization that works that way. A lot of people get trapped under a manager and are just floundering because there's no leadership. Right?
Yeah, the way that I would phrase it is that leadership happens when you start at any level focusing on outcomes instead of the activities that are being done.
Spot on.
But you got to get the activities done. So management doesn't go away in importance. Right. But ultimately, someone in the organization or the enterprise has to be responsible for the outcomes. And the lower that's being done, the more value that you're going to get from that organization and the people working in it.
But I think it's not just, I mean, everyone has a right to that value, and everyone has a right to that vision. And I don't believe people are meant to work in a way where they're just getting tasks done without understanding why. So I think leadership, being available to everyone to provide that vision is necessary.
Yeah, I think one of the best summaries of that I've seen was in the fifth discipline when Senge talks about genuine compliance versus commitment.
Yep.
You can comply with an idea just because you think it's the right thing to do, but the difference is genuine commitment is about overcoming the obstacles that get put in your way to achieving the outcomes and goals that need to be delivered. Mm-hmm. And that's not the sort of things that people are going to overcome when they're just being genuinely compliant with what's going on, because when you run into an obstacle or roadblock, action stops.
Yep. But it does depend a little bit on the environment. Sometimes people need to just do what they're told, because if you have a strategy, whether it's good or bad, you'll never know if you don't do things consistently at scale. Now, some organizations that are more nimble and more free, it's different. But there is sometimes that people just have to kind of do things so you can look at the patterns and say, are we scaling? Such as road construction and laying down, architectural decisions. If everybody just kind of did it on the fly and focused on, well, we're just going to make this thing 1,100 feet tall, that's not going to help necessarily capture the knowledge and the reusability that's there. So there is a balance.
I agree to a point, but if they hit a roadblock as a team, if they have the vision to understand why they're doing what they're doing, they'll break through that roadblock a lot quicker than if they're just getting tasks done.
Yeah, I don't argue the leadership at the top. Someone has to be a leader within that organization. And a good, effective manager who might not be the visionary and the charismatic, but they can actually get the details done, is still an important part of the team.
Sure. Yeah.
As long as they're committed, as Roger said, to the leadership vision, then I feel that you can achieve great things.
Yeah, a lot of it's also dependent on how well you can clearly define the outcomes that are needed. The fuzzier things get, then the more leadership that you need by the people that are doing the work, because ultimately, if you don't know what the standards should be, your only thing that you can judge are the outcomes that are being delivered. Because everybody has good intent, or just about everybody has good intent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, case in point for me, my coming into this organization was to lead the organization into a new direction. I sent the very first email to the team. It was all about hey, my communication skills stink, but I'll make up for it in vision and energy. I just laid out exactly who I am, and to let them know I'm not like the world's greatest manager, but I can see things. I can acclimate very quickly. I'm in tune with a lot of stuff. So let's work together to get there, right? And I'll find the people who can do a better job about getting their expenses in on time, which I just can't seem to do.
Hooper, are you looking for a job? Come on.
I'm not. No, man. I'm just getting started, baby.
It's interesting though. I mean, I talked to someone the other day on the phone, and she had to go because she had a client request come in that had an hour SLA, and she had to finish it within an hour. And I said, okay, well, what happens in an hour? And she's like, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's.
No one ever told you what happens to the client after an hour. I mean, so yeah, she knows she has to get that task done, but it's just arbitrary. It's really meaningless, and we are humans that need to understand that value.
Yeah, and in a vacuum, that sort of thing can work, but the issue is that most people usually have more than one thing going on at a time. And as soon as you need to prioritize, you have to understand what outcomes really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's the crux of why I always harp on collaboration platforms and transparency within organizations. Because if you can just get on there and have a conversation with the leader whose vision is in the product that you're delivering, like you just got that pipeline of whatever it is, je ne sais quoi, directly.
And share customer experiences as a way to promote that vision,
Hey, that's a good point, Roger. So do you bring in customer experience into your book as well? Is that a focus for management from your perspective?
I think it is. The whole last part of the book, the marketplace, really is about that you have to understand the customers outside of the organization. You have to meet the needs of the people that are running the joint day to day, because if you're not doing that, you're just not going to be around long enough to really care about any of those other things. But you can't work in a vacuum and not pay attention to those sorts of things, because one of the roles that a manager has to play is influence in the direction of the organization and bringing that information to the table so that leaders can adjust the course of their vision and strategy as they're trying to figure out what the organization needs to do next.
Yeah.
Roger, let me ask a question about just your personal experience again. What does your work think of you writing the book? I mean, do people know? Are they aware? Do they care? Or is it just kind of a side thing like fishing or golfing to them?
I've told maybe one person at the organization I work with that I've even worked on this book, let alone produced it.
So I have another question, Roger. Were you at all passive-aggressive in the book, like calling out the people that you work with daily but secretly not saying them?
I don't think so.
That would totally me. I would totally be doing that.
I like to think I'm fairly self-aware, but I don't think I could pick up on my own passive-aggressive tendencies. That's not that good.
You could subtweet about your own book, like, oh, somebody really needs to read page 78.
Yeah. These guys will leave copies of the books with like tabs in it. Did you write it under a pseudonym?
No, I did not.
Is this really Roger Williams?
It's really me, yes.
That's why I keep calling him Mr. Williams. So I love at the end of the book, this is the part that I have to make sure that everyone hears. At the end of the book, Roger takes a twist right at the end, at the afterword, and it says specifically that you have to do this stuff to better, like it's sort of like a call to arms. You have to do this because otherwise humanity won't survive. Or that's like what's implied basically. And I think like it was meant to be, I don't know, a stab in the back of IT. IT is dead. Long live IT.
That's an interesting interpretation I honestly hadn't thought about. The intent of the epilogue of the book was really just to say that we've developed this body of knowledge. We've called it service management, but the concepts that underpin it really are a philosophy that we can see in just about any field that we dive into, whether it's ecology, religions, sociological structures. These same concepts keep popping up, and I don't think that that's an accident. Ultimately, good ideas, there aren't a ton of them that are out there, and it shouldn't be a surprise whenever we have an industry that struggled a long time ago to identify what really matters, coming upon the same sorts of solutions that other groups have come upon whenever they've tried to identify what really matters.
Absolutely. The world's oldest industry was request fulfillment, right? I
Yep.
need a house, carpentry, Mark, carpentry. I need a house, someone's going to build it. Mark.
Well, I'm just sitting here.
Yeah, it's true.
What's next, Roger? Is the next book in line?
Haven't really given that much thought yet. I need to get more feedback around how this book does so I can adjust what I'm doing for the next one. I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I mainly just wanted to have the experience of writing the book. It was really about experiencing the process of it. And the other part of it was that I always try to do things that will impress my wife. So since she's a librarian publishing a book, figured that was a good way to do that. So that was a nice little bonus too.
You're a stud now, man.
Well,
ITSM's most famous podcast. Look at you. You're like a rock
There you go. Rocketing up the charts.
So
we have at least 85 viewers. Come on.
Oh, good. So where can we get the book, Roger?
Book's available through Amazon. You can also get it through IT Governance Publishing through their website, IT Governance USA. It's available in other countries as well.
Awesome.
If you're in South Africa, apparently you can buy it, which just kind of blows my mind to even think about that. That somebody sitting in a cubicle somewhere in South Africa could be looking at this and thinking, "Hey, maybe this will help."
Good
Definitely an interesting world we live in.
That'd be
excited to read
fantastic.
it.
They'll find you on Google Plus before they find you on Amazon.
Yeah, I think you're right. Good point.
All right, so I got to put you on the spot for one last question before we go. You actually watch this podcast, which is that's an anomaly, I think, in the world. Like, there are more people in the world that don't listen to our podcast than there are that listen to our podcast, right?
No, sir. Metrics are lying.
And so, what would you do to improve this podcast? What would you like? Apply your concepts in this book to our podcast. How would you make it better?
Dan Hooper.
That's an interesting question. I think, like anything else that you do, you have to start with understanding what is the need that we're trying to meet. What do the people out there really need? And I think a lot of it. I know the reason that I listen to this podcast is because it's people talking about interesting things that are going on in the world that ultimately tie back into what I do for a living. And if you're starting from there, I don't know how many of me's there are out there. Probably not a lot.
There's not very many, Roger.
Not very many of them. Yeah, that's definitely so. But it's ultimately understanding what is it that people need nowadays.
Yeah.
What is the role that is that used to be filled by people going to libraries or going to industry conferences or sitting around having coffee with someone that isn't getting fulfilled now because those things aren't happening nearly as much anymore.
And it changes so quickly. I mean, even looking at back to ITSM on Facebook or wherever, it's different. Not necessarily worse or better, but it's certainly different and seems to change every year.
Okay, so keep listening, and you too could be a genius, or read a lot of books, or write a book, or even stay relevant, or keep your job, or at least hacking business technology. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.